Welcome, good evening, Erev Tov. It is a special pleasure and honor for me, as the director of the Center for Israel Studies, to welcome all of you. It's a special pleasure and honor for me to welcome Etgar Keret tonight. And I'm also glad to mention all of our co-sponsors for tonight's lectures, the Jewish Studies program at AU, the Department of Literature, the Washington College of Law, Jewish Student Law Association, Temple Micah, and the American Association, the Ben Gurion University, American Associates of the Ben Gurion University of the Negev. Thank you all for cooperating tonight. And I should start by going back 3 years, I believe it is now, when we had invited Etgar Keret already for a lecture here at American University, and he had agreed to come. The invitations were sent out. Hundreds of people had signed up. The reception was prepared. And then a few days before the event, we suddenly receive a phone call. Etgar has an accident in a taxi while being on tour in the United States. It sounds almost like a short story he has written. The taxi driver who wanted to be God, maybe. Unfortunately, it was real. And most importantly, Etgar did fully recover and made good on his promise to come to us another time. So here he is, 3 years later. Another book later, Fly Already, a book which, of course, you all can purchase afterwards with his autogram. And a book which has just been released and which we are proud to present to you here at American University at the Center for Israel Studies. Many of you know, but some might not know, that we are actually the first center of Israel Studies in the country. So the new book, of course, another series of amazing, surprising, surreal, and some dark, but also bright short stories. I think most of you here know who Etgar Keret is and what he writes, and that's why you came here tonight. Still, just a few words about his biography. He was born in Israel just after the Six-Day War, to parents who both had survived the Holocaust. Etgar Keret is today not only one of the most celebrated Israeli writers of short stories, but also a scriptwriter, author of graphic novels and of TV series. And he's also a truly international star. You might not even know that more than 40 languages exist or could name them, but he has actually been translated into 41 of them as of yesterday. He also lived for a while in the tiniest house in the world in Warsaw, the Keret House, and he holds both Israeli and Polish citizenship. Occasionally, Etgar Keret, the writer of surreal stories, ventures out into the very real world of political comments on the broader questions of Israel, of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and of coexistence. And I really liked what he had to say when asked about how futile it must be to express his opinion on a subject which seems to be so hopeless. He was asked by Terry Gross on NPR, and he replied, "It reminds me of this scene in One Bird Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in which Jack Nicholson says to all the inmates that he's going to lift this kind of heavy object and throw it and break the window, and they're all going to run through it. And he attempts to lift that object, and he can't even move it. And all the other inmates are laughing, and he looks at them and says, 'You know what? The difference between me and you, at least I have tried.' And you know, so I feel very much like Jack Nicholson whenever I sit down to write an op-ed. You know, I feel like I'm trying to lift this kind of immovable object, that I'm doing something that is futile, and yet I feel that I need to keep trying." So I really like that, like many other of the answers he gave to Terry Gross in this interview. And I think we all need to keep trying because without trying, there is no chance of even achieving the slightest success. So I'm happy we have the opportunity now not to hear me quote Etgar Keret, but to have him here in person. We will hear him for about half an hour reading and talking to us, and then we'll be on stage. I'll be together with my colleague Melissa Scholes-Young from the Department of Literature, who is a novelist herself, who is also an editor of DC Women Writers. She's also the director of the undergraduate creative writing program here at AU. She also knows how to drive a tractor, I just learned. But I don't think we'll talk about this, so who knows. So both of us will be in conversation with Etgar Keret afterwards. But for now, please join me in welcoming Etgar Keret. We're all looking forward to hear about his dark and surreal, but perhaps also a little bit his bright and very real worlds.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that I arrived this time, and the car service guy didn't have an accident this time around. I think when I think about my introduction to stories and the role of stories in my life, it goes way back to the bedtime stories that my parents would tell me when I was a child. My parents were both Holocaust survivors, and my mother had lost all her family in the war, her parents, her kid brother, and she had very few good memories from these times. You know, they were in the Warsaw Ghetto. But one of her best memories were the bedtime stories that her parents would tell her. And since it was in the ghetto, they could not read to her from a book because they had no access to a book. But every morning when they would go out and try to survive and pass the day and maybe bring something to eat, you know, or a piece of clothes that they could give my mother to protect her, they would come back with a story and would tell her a bedtime story. And it was as if they could not give her anything material, but what they could give her was her imagination and the love. And my mom said that she never fell asleep in the middle of a story, because she knew that this story will be only told once, and she's the only recipient, so if she will fall asleep, the story will be lost. And this was a sentiment that she wanted to pass to her children, because it was a good experience and she wanted to share it with us. And it was very strange because I grew up in a house that my parents, each of them spoke, read and wrote in 6 languages. Our house was full of books, but we had no children books at all. Because for my mother, to read us a story from a book would be like to order a pizza instead of making us a proper dinner. For her, reading from books to children was what lazy parents did, you know. A good parent would work every day, and my mother worked in a fabric store, and every person who came and said something that was funny or interesting, everything that she saw in the street, every stray dog, she would kind of collect it, so she'll have a good story to share with us at nights. But the problem is that sometimes she had to work until late hours, and my father had to tell us stories. And my father really wished that there were some children books around, because he wasn't like my mom. And he was a very good storyteller, but he didn't have the gift that my mother had to invent stories. So basically, whenever my father would tuck me in bed, he would tell me something that had happened to him in his life, something that he had seen. So I was introduced to documentary storytelling, you know, at the age of 4, you know. And the stories of my father were always, the protagonists were always, how I would say, kind of dubious people or problematic people. all those stories had a lot of things that were totally inappropriate for children. But the way that a typical story would go would be like, this guy goes to this place, somebody says to him something, he punches him, he breaks the guy's teeth, he feels bad. He says, come on, my cousin is a dentist. So it was those kind of stories. And the stories of my fathers, they had one thing in common. They always took place in a whorehouse. And the protagonists, they were always prostitutes, mafia guys, and drunk people. And as a child, I asked him, Dad, what's a prostitute? He says, oh, that's a good question. A prostitute is someone who gets paid to listen to other people's problems. And what's a mafia guy? Oh, mafia people, they are people who collect rents from apartments that don't belong to them. So even at the age of 4, I saw a real estate opportunity there, and I asked him what are drunk people. He said, oh, drunk people are people who have these medical conditions that the more liquid they drink, the happier they become. So even before I reached first grade, I had my first kind of professional dilemma, because I didn't know if when I grew up I want to become a drunk mafia guy or a drunk male prostitute, because in my father's stories, it all sounded so kind of warm and interesting, when I reached, I think, the age of 9, my father wasn't telling me stories anymore. I was reading books, but I finally really understood what a prostitute and a mafia guy were, and I confronted my father, and I said to my father, I know now that what really happened in the stories that you told me, and it's totally wrong, and you shouldn't tell stories like this to children, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And my father said, listen, I just want to explain to you the ways that I see it. It's like, when you were a kid and you were in bed, I wanted to tell you a story, and I'm not like mother, I cannot invent stories, so my instinct was to tell stories from my childhood and my youth. But what stories will I tell you? That I hid with my parents for 620 days in a hole in the ground in which we could not lie or stand. It's not a story to tell a kid. You would not fall asleep. Should I tell you a story about how the Nazis caught my kid sister and tortured her to death, but she refused to say where I was hiding? It's something that I carry with me every day, but I thought it would be wrong to share it with you. So I kind of fast-forwarded my life until after the war. And after the war, I wanted to go to Israel. That's a good story for a kid, only the British who controlled Israel at the time, they caught me and deported me to Cyprus. And I thought that this could sound a bit depressing too. But when I was back in Cyprus and later in Europe, I joined the Irgun, which was kind of an underground movement fighting the British. And they said to me, because you're in Europe and you can't get into Israel, we got a job for you. You'll find people who are willing to sell firearms and buy firearms for us. So I found myself with the guys that I was working in Italy, in Reggio Calabria, because what's a better place to buy weapons than mafia land, the mafia guys. And when we started buying those weapons, we didn't have any money of our own. We just had the money to do the deals. The mafia guys took pity on us, and they said, we know you can't afford an apartment, so we own a whorehouse, and you can stay there for free. There's always a free bed, and you can stay there for free. And my father said to me, the 8 months that I've been in this place were the first time in my life that I didn't have to hide the fact that I was a Jew. It was the first time in my life when if I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would just say, it's nothing, and go back to sleep, And it was this was the time where my belief in mankind had returned to me. And I thought this is an inspiring thing to share my child with, to tell him, people can actually be good. And I think that that when you're a child and you hear a story, it's not even when you're a child, and anything that you see, I don't know, you see a button, children always press buttons, right? And the reason that they press buttons, they want to understand what it is good for. Everything that they see, they try to operate. And for me as a child, through my father, I kind of understood what stories were good for. The stories were good for advocating for people who maybe in real life we would not like, or we would hate, or would try to keep distance from, but through fiction we can empathize with them and we can humanize with them, and we don't have to justify them, but we have to accept their humanity. And I guess that that those children book stories they still echo in my mind when I write my stories. And I want to read to you the first story in the collection. I'll only read it because so we'll have time to talk and to do other things. But I wanted to say that this story is very much connected to the accident that stopped me from coming here, because 3 years ago I was touring and I did an event in Wesleyan in Connecticut. A car service guy was supposed to take me to Taft in Boston. Now I have this thing that when I'm in America, it takes me about 2 days to become American, which means I'm very, very nice, very, very polite, and I don't really care about anybody, So, I met this car service guy. Hi, how you doing? Everything's fine. What nice weather, I get into the car, I start emailing, calling my, and here's this guy driving me very fast, actually, when I think about it, driving me very fast to Boston, actually a bit scaringly fast to Boston. And at some stage, the car that is driving hits another car, and it's really like this accident is really like, all the glasses in the car are shattered, the airbags expand and then explode. The driver who has short sleeves, after the gas thing, it explodes, it scorched his entire arm. The car kind of is half ripped from under it. I feel a terrible pain that I cannot understand the source, and I'm in this car covered with glass, smelling burning flesh and gas, and I have this kind of memory that when I was a kid, there was this parliament member in Israel that had died, and they said he died in a car accident. His death was not immediate. And I said, okay, I'm dying in a car accident, and my death is not immediate, And basically, when I was there, kind of like immersed in my pain, but at the same time also trying to say goodbye to this world, like in a very nice and civilized way, and realizing that actually that I kind of got the life that I wanted, So like, I mean, if you could order from the menu, I got the dish I wanted, The portion was a bit too small to me, but I couldn't complain about that. So I was thinking about all those things that I should have done, to help my wife now that I'm dying. I was hoping that she will not be too proud and will get remarried, because my son can be a real pain in the ass, She would need help. And as I was thinking all those thoughts, the door of the car was opened, and a very big policewoman grabbed me by the arm and pulled me. And this was really a dumb thing to do, because I was wearing my seat belt and I had 2 broken ribs. I didn't know that at the time, but when she did it, it was very painful. And I said to her, hey, what are you doing? And actually my subtext was, I'm dying my not immediate death, I would not want to be disturbed by, by Boston policewoman right doing that, If this was a movie, you would be an extra, and you would be kept out of frame while I have my death. But she was very polite and nice and said, sir, I'm trying to get you away from the car before it explodes. And this kind of was a segue to a kind of a new friendship that flourished between me and that policewoman that I disliked the moment before. And she was able to take me and the driver outside of the car, and they drove us to a Boston hospital. And when I reached the Boston hospital, they said, look, we have to do this kind of MRI to see, we're sure that you broke your ribs, but we want to make sure that you didn't puncture your lung. And I was waiting there with the driver who had the whiplash and he had the burns. And as I'm there, it's kind of like 5 p.m., which is midnight in Israel. My wife is calling me. So I answer the phone and say, hi. And she said, hi, it's midnight here. I'm about to sleep. How are you doing? And I said, I'm doing great. I can't speak right now because I'm about to start speaking. The audience is already here. They're all beautiful and handsome. And I have to hang up. I'll call you tomorrow. And my logic was that, that by tomorrow I know if I punctured my lung or I didn't puncture my lung. If I tell my wife at midnight, look, I'm waiting for an MRI, she won't sleep all night and it will be good for nothing. So as I kind of hang up the phone, I hear the driver speaking to somebody over his phone and he says, hi, honey, I can't talk right now because I'm in the car, I'm looking for parking and it's full of policemen here. I don't want them to write me a ticket. And he hung up his phone. And I looked at him, and these guys that really, for all our drive, I couldn't find one thing in common. He all the time said to me how much he loves barbecuing. I'm a vegetarian, It's like everything kind of went to a different direction. I said, okay, we have something in common. We both lie to our wives, as if it's nothing over the phone, So we kind of, we kind of united from this moment. We helped each other. I got out of hospital. I stayed at my friend's home at Boston a few days before I could fly, and that's when I started writing these stories. That I think that if anything that kind of inspired it, it was really this discovery that really, like me and the driver, we all so very different, but we all hurt the same. And once we know pain, what we want is to save other people from that pain. It doesn't matter if they're close to us or stranger. It's like we all know this kind of thing that when we see something painful, our face goes like this. Pain makes us empathize with others. I wish that there would be other nicer things that would make us empathize with people before pain arrives, but pain makes us empathize with people. Fly already. PT season first. We're on our way to the park to play ball when he suddenly says, Daddy, look! His head is tilted back and he's squinting hard to see something far above me. And before I can even begin to imagine an alien spaceship or a piano about to fall on our heads, my gut tells me that something really bad is happening here. But when I turn to see what PT is looking at, all I notice is an ugly 4-story building covered in plaster and air conditioner, as if it had some kind of skin disease. The sun is sitting directly on it, slightly blinding me. And as I'm trying to get a better angle, I hear PT saying, he wants to fly. Now I can see a guy in a white button-down shirt standing on the roof railing, looking straight at me. And behind me, PT whispers, is he a superhero? But instead of answering him, I shout to the guy, don't do it. The guy stares at me and doesn't answer. I shout at him again, don't do it, please. Whatever brought you up there must seem like something you never get over, but believe me, you will. If you jump now, you leave this world with that dead-end feeling. That will be your last memory of life. Not family, not love, only defeat. But if you stay, I swear to you, by everything I hold dear, that your pain will start to fade, And in a few years, the only thing left will be a weird story you tell people over a beer. A story about how you once wanted to jump off a roof and some guy standing below shouted at you, "What?" The guy on the roof yells back at me, pointing at his ear. He probably can't hear me because of the noise coming from the road. Or maybe it isn't the noise, because I heard his what perfectly well. Maybe he's just hard of hearing. Pity, who's hugging my thighs without being able to encircle them completely, as if I were some kind of a giant baobab tree, yells at the guy, "Do you have superpowers?" But the guy points at his ear again, as if to say he can't hear, and shouts, "I'm sick of it. Enough. How much can I take?" Pity shouts back at him, as if they were having the most ordinary conversation in the world. "Come on, fly already." And I'm starting to feel that stress. The stress that comes with knowing that it's all on you. I have it a lot at work. With the family too, but not as much. Like what happened on the way to Lake Kinneret, when I tried to brake and the tires locked. The car started to skid along the road, and I said to myself, either you fix this or it's all over. That time, driving to the Dead Sea, I didn't fix it. And Liat, the only one not buckled in, died, and I was left alone with the kids. Pity was two and barely knew how to speak. But Amit never stopped asking me, "When is mommy coming back? When is mommy coming back?" And I'm talking about after the funeral. He was 8 then, an age when you're supposed to understand what it means when someone dies. But he kept asking, and even without the constant annoying questions, I knew that everything was my fault and wanted to end it all, just like the guy on the roof. But here I am today, walking without crouches, living with Simona, a good dad. I want to tell the guy on the roof all about it. I want to tell him that I know exactly how he feels right now, and that if he doesn't flatten himself like a pizza on the sidewalk, it will pass. I know what I'm talking about, because no one on this blue planet was as miserable as I was. He just has to get down from there and give himself a week, a month, even a year if necessary. But how can you say all that to a guy who's half deaf? Meanwhile, Pity pulls my hand and says, "He's not going to fly today anyway. Daddy, let's go to the park before it gets dark." But I stay where I am and shout as loudly as I can. People die like flies all the time, even without killing themselves. Don't do it, please, don't do it. The guy on the roof nods. It looks like this time he heard something, and shouts back at me, "How did you know? How did you know she died?" Someone always dies, I want to yell back at him. Always. If not her, then someone else. But that won't get him down from there. So instead I shout, there's a kid here," and point to Pity. "He doesn't need to see this." Then Pity yells, "Yes I do, yes I do. Come on, and fly already, before it gets dark." It's December, and it really does get dark early. If he jumps, that will be on my conscience too. Irena, the psychologist at the clinic, will give me that "after you I'm going home" look of hers and say, "You're not responsible for everyone. You have to get that into your head." And I'll nod because I know that the sessions end in 2 minutes and she has to pick up her daughter from daycare. But it won't change anything, because I'll have to carry that half-deaf guy on my back, along with Liat and Amit's glass eye. I have to save him. "Wait for me, wait there for me," I scream, as loudly as I can. "I'm coming up to talk to you." "I can't go on without her, I can't," he shouts. "Wait a minute," I yell, and say to Pity, "Come on, sweetie, let's go up to the roof." Pity gives an adorable shake of his head, the way he always does right before he sticks the knife in, and says, "If he flies, we can see better from here." "He won't fly," I say. "Not today. Let's go up there, just for a minute. Daddy has to tell the man something." But Petey persists. So you're from here. His arm slips out of my grasp and he throws himself down to the ground, the way he likes to do to Simona and me at the mall. Let's race to the roof, I say. If we get there without stopping, Petey and Daddy get ice cream as a prize. Ice cream now, Petey wails, rolling around the sidewalk. Ice cream now! I have no time for this crap. I pick him up. He screams and screams, but I ignore it and start running toward the building. What happened to the kid? I hear the guy shouts from the roof. I don't answer and race into the building. Maybe his curiosity will stop him for now. Maybe it will keep him from jumping long enough for me to get up to the roof. The kid is heavy. It's hard to climb all those stairs when you're holding a 5.5-year-old kid in your arms, especially one who doesn't want to go up the stairs. By the third floor, I'm completely out of breath. A fat redhead who must have heard Petey's screams opens her door a crack and asks who I'm looking for. But I ignore her and keep climbing. Even if I want to say something to her, I don't have enough air in my lungs. No one lives upstairs, she shouts after me. It's just the roof. When she says roof, her shrill voice breaks, and Petey yells back at her in a tear-filled voice, Ice cream now! Now! I don't have a free hand to push open the door that should lead outside. My arms are full of Petey, who doesn't stop flailing, so I kick it as hard as I can. The roof is empty. The guy who was on the railing a minute ago isn't there anymore. He didn't wait for us. Didn't wait to find out why the kid was screaming. He flew, Petey sobs. He flew, and because of you we didn't see anything. I start walking towards the railing. Maybe he changed his mind and went back into the building, I try to tell myself, but I don't believe it. I know he's down there, his body sprawled on the sidewalk at an unnatural angle. I know it, and I have a kid in my arms who absolutely shouldn't see that because it will traumatize him for the rest of his life, and he's already been through enough. But my legs take me to the edge of the roof. It's like scratching a wound, like ordering another shot of Shivas when you know you've already had too much to drink. Like driving a car when you know you're tired, so tired. Now that we ride at the railing, we start to feel the height. Petey stops crying, and I can hear both of us panting and the ambulance siren in the distance. It seems to be asking me, why? Why do you need to see it? You think it will change anything? Make anyone feel better? Suddenly, the redhead's shrill voice commands me from behind. Put him down. I turn around, not really understanding what she wants. Put me down, Petey shouts too. It always gets him going when a stranger butts in. It's just a kid, the redhead keeps saying, but her voice is suddenly cracked and soft. She's on the verge of tears. The sound of the siren is getting closer, and the redhead starts walking toward me. I know you're suffering, she says. I know that everything is so hard. I know, believe me. There's so much pain in her voice that even Petey stops flailing, and stares at her, mesmerized. Look at me, she whispers, fat, alone. I had a child once too. You know what it is to lose a child? Do you have any idea of what you're about to do? Still in my arms, Petey hugs me tight. Look at what a sweet child he is, she says, already close to us, her thick hand stroking Petey's hair. There was a man here, Petey says, fixing his huge green eyes, Liat's eyes, on her. There was a man here, but now he flew away, and because of Daddy, we didn't see him. The siren stops right under us, and I take another step toward the railing. But the redhead's sweaty hand grabs mine. Don't do it, she says. Please, Don't do it. Petey has a scoop of vanilla in a plastic cup. I order pistachio and chocolate chip in a cone. The redhead asks for a chocolate milkshake. All the tables in the ice cream parlor are filthy, so I clean one for us. Petey insists on tasting the milkshake, and she lets him. She's called Liat too. It's a common name. She doesn't know about our Liat, about the accident. She doesn't know anything about us. And I don't know anything about her, except that she lost her kid. When we left the building, they were putting the guy's body into the ambulance. Luckily, it was covered with a white sheet. One less image of a corpse in my mind. The ice cream is too sweet for me, but Petey and the redhead look happy. With his cone in one hand, he reaches out for a milkshake with the other. I don't know why he always does that. After all, he's still eating his ice cream. Why does he need more? I open my mouth to say something to him, but the redhead signals that it's okay and gives him her almost empty cup. Her son's dead. My wife's dead. The guy on the roof is dead. He's so cute, she whispers as Petey strains to suck up the last drop of milkshake in the paper cup. He really is cute.
So,
Can you hear me? Not yet. Now you can hear me. Welcome. What a great night. I'm glad you're here. Years ago, it was my classroom you were supposed to walk into. And my students were disappointed, but they are creative writers, so they know how to pivot and to make literature out of tragedy.
If I ever see a novel he never came, I know that I've inspired it.
Thank you for coming, and thank you to the Center for Israel Studies for bringing this community together tonight. This is quite a treat. About half of this room are, more than half maybe, are American University students, and many of us have been studying your work, reading your work. I've assigned them your books, and yet in a Guardian interview you did last week, I read that you aren't reading books any longer, and that you're binge watching Netflix. And they too would like to binge watch Netflix.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you could talk for just a minute about what it is that you're finding in that type of storytelling that maybe books and words are falling short of, or how you're reconciling your binging.
First of all my life I've read, and I'm a heavy reader. But what I was saying in this interview is that even when I feel that I lack the energy to read, I'm still addicted to stories, you know. So the thing is that reading is a much greater effort because a book is a collaboration, you know, between a text and or the person who wrote the text and the person who's reading it. Because every time you read a book, you're very active. You have to imagine the description of the characters, the ones that were not given. You have to kind of time it and think how quickly a conversation take place. You know, you have to add all those details that are missing. And if you like a director of a movie, you see something in a close-up or in a wider shot. And last year, basically, I was, for the first time in my life, I felt so kind of low on energies that I couldn't do that, you know. Like I am reading now, but for a very long time, the longest time in my life, I didn't read.
And so as a storyteller, a writer, a director, right? You write TV shows as well with your wife. How do you switch those energies? Or do you find that they feed and fuel each other?
Yeah, well, first of all, for me, there is something about writing that writing is a territory of total freedom. When I write a story, I don't know what I'm going to write. You know, it's not constructed. It's very much like dreaming. Like there is a sentence or an image, like in this story, a father and a child looking up. I didn't know what they see, but I saw a father and a child looking up, and I went with it. And there is some kind of an energy of the story that leads me. You know, it's like I still remember the moment where I wrote that they opened the door and the guy is not there. As they were running up the stairs, I was hoping that they opened the door and the guy would be there. You know, so for me,
We were definitely too.
so there is something about for me that kind of writing short fiction is this kind of place where you lose control. Where you just like, you know, let the story take you. You know, it's really like surfing. You know, when you surf, what you try to do, you get on the board, you try to keep your balance. You're not saying, oh, I'm going to go there by myself a Coca-Cola and then I do a U-turn. You're on the wave and you try not to fall, and that's the way I write my stories. But when I have something that I feel that is kind of a bigger than a short story, I always prefer to write it as a script, because I think that there is something about scripts that, for me, in definition, they are not a work of art. They are kind of a recipe for a work of art. Let's say if a short story is baking a cake, and you know. My mom, when she bakes a cake, if you ask her how much sugar you put in, she wouldn't know. She puts it and somehow it comes okay. So when you write a script, it's a recipe that has to be very, very clear. So the actors, the DOP, you know, the director, if he's not you, will understand what you're talking about. You have to put it in this kind of objective place that is outside of you. And the moment that I do this action, I can structure, I can think about what will be in the beginning, what will be in the middle, what will be in the end. And then when I write the scene, I can again lose control, you know, not know what's going to happen. So with me, it's always like making movies or writing theater is structure, and writing short stories is really total chaos, which is, I guess, something that I like a lot.
You've also said that writing is scary, that it's, you said it was akin to being shot out of a cannon?
I have a story. No, because I have a story here about a guy who cleans the cages in a circus. You know, he cleans the elephant cages. It's not an easy job. And one day the circus owner offers him that he'll shoot him out of a cannon, because the guy who's usually like the human cannonball, according to the circus owner, he's too drunk to do it. Through the stories, we understand that he broke all his ribs, you know, the night before that. So, and in the conversation, you know, our guy says, you know, but I don't have any training, you know. And he says to me, man, you don't need any training. You just need to be miserable and pathetic enough, you know. It's really like, look at you, your wife left you, your kid kind of that doesn't think much of you, even your pet cat, you know, ran away. You're perfect, you know, you're just perfect for this, you know. And in the story, they kind of, he promises him, you know, I don't know, $100 for being shot. And they have a deal that after they shoot him, he said to him, even if you break something, you have to return and bow to the audience and, like, you know, not show that anything is wrong. But the angle of the cannon is not the right one, so he flies off, ripping the tent, and he goes in the sky. And when you go in the sky, you can see his ex-wife, you know, coming out of a car, and his boy who's playing in the park sees him and actually waves to him. And as he goes along, he even gets to find his cat, you know. And in the end, he lands into the water, of the Mediterranean next to Tel Aviv beach. And he gets out of the water, and as he hits the water, everybody claps to him, and and they're nice to him. They give him a towel, and he goes with his like semi wet clothes back to the circus. And when he reaches the circus, everybody's already gone. And the owner of the circus is there counting the money, of the ticket. And and he says to him, like in a very tough voice, he said, we had an agreement that you come back and you bow. I'm taking off $30 for that, And our guy says to him, forget about money. Do a friend a favor and shoot me from that cannon again. And for me, this story is a story about writing, because I think that the idea is that for me, when I write, it's like I'm being shot off a cannon, in that sense that I lose control. There is some kind of trajectory, and I cannot take a right or a left. It just takes me somewhere, and that somewhere can be a brick wall, So it's scary, but at the same time, it gives you a perspective of your own life. I think this guy, when he flies and he sees his ex-wife and his child, not when they argue over custody or when he pulls his child by the arm because he wants to go, I don't know, for another direction, but you can see them from a perspective. So I think that's, for me, writing. Writing is basically the kind of taking a leave from being in life and seeing your life, your emotions, everything around you from some kind of a vantage point.
And so much of your work is absurd, right? It's funny, and we're all laughing with you, but there's so many layers of humanity, so many layers of truth to it. And yet it defies genre, right? It defies those definitions, those boxes that we're trying to put form in. And one of my favorite stories from this collection is the Tabula Rasa. And will you talk a little bit about how, if you could categorize that story, or where did that story come from, or what do you think it's really accomplishing? It's a pretty political story.
Yeah, it may be a little bit tough to tell the entire story. I don't know. I can do it, but I don't know.
It's
Yeah, okay. Or we could skip this question.
skip this question.
No, it's just
We do that.
I have a brilliant answer,
And
but
you can
I just told you one story. Like, if I tell you all the stories, you won't buy the book,
Oh, read it. Here's one question he can skip. How about that?
Sure. Michael, do you have a question as well?
Well, okay. I just, Melissa's the literature person. I come from more the Israeli history side. But of course, I always ask myself, many of these stories are very universal and they can play anywhere. But there's also you started telling a little bit about your parents' experience. And I can feel this in many of the stories, this, in a way, the tragic behind the humor and behind the lightness. But also, of course, I wanted to ask a little bit, because we are the Center for Israel Studies, how do you think the place you grew up and you live in, how Israel shapes your telling of a story, which maybe others would have told differently?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of like, I was born in Israel, I grew up in Israel, but if I have to classify myself, I would say I'm much more a Jewish writer than an Israeli writer, because I see my place much more in the tradition of Kafka or Shalom Aleichem or Bashevis Singer than in the tradition of wonderful writers like Amos Oz or Rabbi Yoshua, because I think, first of all, the Israeli literature, it's very epic. It's like an epos. I think only a country that is so young would have such a yearning to have those kind of 800 pages books telling stories of families going through generation, like Mr. Money, or even A Tale of Love and Darkness as a huge scope. And while Jewish writers, they always wrote short fiction. It's like Isaac Babel and many others. And also, you talked about humor, and I think there is a lot of Jewish humor. For me, to be honest, Israeli humor is non-existent. I mean, not that that Israelis do not tell jokes, but I cannot really have a distinct them between a French joke or an American joke. Jewish humor, it's because I think first of all the unique thing about Jewish humor is that many times in the world I see humor which is built on alienation. It's like, let's say when I see, I don't know, an American movie about hillbillies, and they're so silly, those movie was not written by hillbillies, it was written by somebody in LA that thought that he could cash in on that, But let's say Jews, we never tell jokes on strangers. We tell jokes about our mother and our brother. You have to love somebody enough, to use a joke on them. It's a way of showing an emotion. It's a way of connecting. It's a way. So this is something that I totally connect with. And I also think that that the reason that there is Jewish humor and much less of Israeli humor, that humor is always the weapon of the weak. We grew strong enough that we don't need humor anymore. We can do without. But I think that for me, I always say that humor is, if we talk about, it's like an airbag in a car. It presents itself, in front of a catastrophe. I remember that once I was with my family in a holiday in Tulum in Mexico, and it was very beautiful. It was so beautiful that my son started getting bored, and we were walking on the beach, and my son said to me, "Dad, can you do me a favor?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Can you be funny?" And I said to him, "No way." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because everything's okay, And I think that for me, really, humor is there. Let's say to keep our dignity in those moments. Like I mean, let's say if you sleep on a banana peel, then let's say you could say, "Oh, damn banana peel! Who put this banana peel?" And you won't keep your dignity then. Or you could say, "Oh, I think I broke my back," and it will be pathetic too. But if you're able to make a joke on it, then your back will still hurt, but you kept some of your dignity. And I think that Jewish humor was a way to keep your dignity in the diaspora, and I guess even in Israel, I still have this need to keep my dignity all the time, and to kind of put this pain into some context.
I found, if I may just connect, I found your answer really interesting because that's true, and I didn't realize it when I was reading, but I think there is really this difference when I read your stories, and having grown up in European Jewish community in Germany, I always felt a little bit like that when I went to Israel, that was very different because in Israel, Jews are in a very different situation, and the humor, of course, is also influenced by that. In one of your stories, you talk about when you come to, you spend a lot of time in Poland, and when you land in Warsaw, it's like the Jew in you comes out even more because you're back in, of course, in the diaspora, and still, it's of course a very secular Jewish identity. You think in a radio interview you once talked about, you mentioned your sister who is very Orthodox, and your son was asked if he believed in God, or if the family
He believes that God
Maybe
exists.
You tell what.
Yeah. So.
In your book.
No.
Okay.
No. Just
so
no.
they
Just,
can get this for free.
No, he says that he was asked. They asked him in school if he thinks that God exists. He said yes, but only in Jerusalem.
I thought of another one where he says, "Well, my aunt."
Yeah, he said. My mother said that there is no God. My aunt says that there is a God, and my father hadn't decided yet. That's how you say agnostic when you're 5 years old.
As a writer, I know you began in journalism, and I know you used to write op-eds as well. as a writer, do you feel responsibility to respond to current political moments?
Well, first I want to say that the reasons that I write is because I don't want to feel responsible. I feel responsible the rest of the time. I mean, let's say if you ask me now a question and I answer some kind of answer, I could offend you, I don't know, I could offend the audience, I could do something. When I write, I know that whatever I do, it just kind of my imagination being splashed on a paper. If I want, I don't need to show it to anyone. I feel that I'm excused, I think and that is when it comes to stories, I think that writing op-eds is something that I hate doing. I really hate it. It's really like a chore, it's like washing the dishes or taking off the garbage, it's something that it humiliates me because I feel that there is something in it as if I misuse writing. Because for me, writing is a place where you show ambiguity, where you confuse your reader, you make him ask questions about life. And many times when you write an op-ed, it's actually the opposite. You simplify reality. You say, okay, so there are two answers, A and B, and in my op-ed I will show you that it's B and not A. So it's completely annoying, and I think that for many years I did it because that's the only thing I knew how to do. Like, I demonstrate in demonstrations, I speak up my mind, but I felt that op-eds were a way to affect reality. But the truth is that, that one day I looked at myself, like, after publishing op-eds, and I said, writing op-eds is a little bit like being a milkman. It used to be a respectable profession, but nobody gives a damn. Really, we live in such a era in which people are not really interested in being exposed to arguments that may change their minds. So I find myself actually writing less and less op-eds just because I felt that these tools that all my life I saw in it, I wasn't too happy to use, but I thought that it was very effective. I think it kind of lost its effect in our days.
I think we should hear your voices as well and open up the discussion. We have some time, of course, for questions. So, as we always do, if the students have questions, we want to take them first. But we'll take, of course, the others too. Let's see. Any students first?
Here's the question.
Here.
It's like our classroom. I'm just calling on you.
Introduce yourself.
My name's Tariq. Good to see you again. Reading through your stories, a lot of your characters seem to be chasing something, happiness or some sort of good feeling. Most of the time to extreme situations, and I'm just kind of wondering if, since you include that so often, that chase for whatever good feeling they really want, do you think that that's a sort of universal characteristic that we all have at the end of the day?
Well, what I can say is I think that the one thing that all my characters have is some kind of yearning. I would say that even some sort of optimism. And I think that if there is a tone to my story, I would say that it's sad optimism. And I think that sad optimism just makes total sense because I think that, that if you're pessimistic, you have nothing to be sad about. If you say, oh, this is life, it's crap, yeah, okay. But if you say there is some kind of a gap between what I am and what I can be, maybe I can be a better person, maybe I can live a better life, maybe people around me can be kinder to me, then this gap is what manufactures the sadness. And I think that the one thing that my characters usually have in common is that they never give up. They're really like, they fuck up all the time, they take the wrong decisions, but all the time they have this strong belief that humanity can reach higher, that they personally can be in a better spot, and you called it the pursuit of you know of kind of I don't how did you define it? Good feeling. I think that you know that maybe it goes beyond that. You know, I think that it is the pursuit of a better word. You know, or the pursuit of a better me.
Hello again as well. I guess my name's Olivia Yuri. Earlier, when you met with some of our class, you kind of likened writing your stories as a trust fall, and a lot of those times those stories let you fall back without catching you. Do you ever have ideas or just kind of feelings that will lead you back to a story that didn't work in the past, or do you kind of just leave them and refuse to trust them again?
Well, I think that you know, really more often I begin to write a story, and basically at some stage see that these kind of emotions that started the story created something that is totally not complete, and it happens many times. But there were stories that basically I returned to a few years later after going through something in my life that suddenly made me understand that I can go back to them, and this time I can write them in the right way. You know, it's not really systematic, but I really think that you know that let's say when I write stories and I'm unable to finish them, I never kind of keep them or collect them. You know, I just kind of throw them out there, and I know that that this kind of kernel of truth in them, or the things that creates in them, will find its way sometimes to another story, or sometimes in another time, and it will kind of reappear.
That's a long walk. Michelle, do you want to go ask?
Hi, I'm Michelle Ingert. Thanks for coming. It's really wonderful to have you here. And I was curious if you had any thoughts or comments on the Nobel Prize in Literature a couple of years ago going to singer-songwriter, guitar, and piano player Bob Dylan. Any thoughts or comments about that choice?
Well, first of all, you know, I'm a professor in the Ben Gurion University, and one of the first courses that I taught, because I mostly focus on short fiction, was basically it was called like telling a story in a song. So it was basically about storytelling in the works of singer-songwriters like Bob Dylan, Randy Newman, Leonard Cohen. And I think that you can learn a lot from it, both because it's the shortest form ever. When you write a song and you have to tell a story, you're very, very limited. You know, you have to say in a sentence, you have to pass a lot. And also because of the fact that, you know, that you have to be very conscious to meter, you know, to rhyming. So there is something about not only the content of the sentence, but the way that it's shaped and sounds. The truth is, first of all, I tell you something in general, like as somebody who really, really likes winning literary prizes, I really think that literary prizes do not mean a lot, really. Because in the bottom line, it's kind of imposing on them some kind of a system that may be good for athletics, you know. Doesn't make much sense, because I think that if you as a writer you celebrate your individuality, you know, if I would give people prizes for their characters, you know, like I mean, I know some nice guys, you know, I would give them a medal, and I know some assholes that, you know, that wouldn't get even to the semi-finals, you know, but in the bottom line, it's really, really dumb. I think that let's say I see my book as some kind of a offer of friendship. You know, I say, you know, Michelle, I think you and my book can be good friends. You know, Michael might get jealous, but you can, but they can be really good friends. You know, and I'm saying that there are many, like, I think that I can be good friends to some people, but not good friends to all of those people. And the moment that there are three people sitting in a room and they make this kind of objective decision, I don't think it really means a lot. I mean, I think, first of all, I think that literary prizes, by the way, are very important because their importance is that they expose and create some kind of artificial spotlight around the work of art, and it makes people discover it, and it can, and it can make those prize giver some kind of curators, and in that sense it has a good effect. But in the bottom line, to say he's not worthy of this prize or he's worthy of the prize is really something that I think it's totally subjective. I want to say that if I don't think much of literary prizes, I think even less on the Nobel Prize for Literature, because it's really the most political prize ever. You see so many amazing writers in the 20th century not getting it. And all these kind of calculations that has to do with, this country got it 3 times, we didn't give one to the Jews, it's all this kind of thing. Really, it's something that, every kind of 12 years there is a poet from a small country that you cannot pronounce that wins the prize, and everybody say, it's so amazing, you see, you're not only giving it to Europeans and to Americans, and nobody reads this guy's poetry ever. So I'm saying that for me the Nobel Prize is a good example of how literary prize shouldn't function, and the good thing for me in kind of giving it Bob Dylan the Nobel Prize, I think, Bob Dylan is one of my favorite singers and I love his work, but I think that the good thing in giving his prize is basically, it's in Nobel Prize standard, it's a very anarchistic act. I'm saying, I think when people who sit in the committee say, hey, let's go crazy, let's go so wild that we'll give a prize to somebody who was maybe one of the most important artists 50 years ago, let's give him a prize now because it took us 50 years to get the guts to do it. I mean, if they would have given him the Nobel Prize in 72, I say, you know what, I got you guys wrong, but in the end, that even when they rebel, they rebel so much that they give it to a pensioner, So, so I can badmouth about anything, so you shouldn't get me started here.
Hi. Is it on? Okay. So I was first introduced to your stories in English a few years ago, and then in my first year of college, when I was in Hebrew class, we read some of your stories in Hebrew, and I was in a translation class also where I was translating between English and Hebrew, and I was wondering how much do you feel gets lost in translation? Because I mean, personally, I noticed a huge difference between reading the stories in English and Hebrew. So, do you have any say in the translations? How much do you feel gets lost, or if anything is even added by translating it?
Well, I can say to you that, I think that every writer who writes always has a feeling that he writes in the most amazing and unique and special language in the world. Really, but in my case, I'm right. And I think one has to understand the story of the Hebrew language and to understand what a unique story there is. Many times when I try to explain to children about the Hebrew language, I say to them, it's like Captain America, It's this language that people spoke 2,000 years ago. Then they stopped speaking it, but kept learning it as a written language of scripture. And then 2,000 years later, they got defrosted, We put this language, we put it in the microwave of history, pressed, 30 seconds, and and we have the language, and then people arbitrarily speak it. So I think, let's say compare Hebrew to English, okay? If Abraham or Isaac would come to Tel Aviv and get on a taxi, you know, in a cab, they would understand about 60 or 70% of what the driver is saying. You know, if William Shakespeare, you know, would try to take a Uber here, you know, he wouldn't understand a word of what the guy is saying because through the years, you know, the English language kept evolving and changing, while the Hebrew language it was kept as it used to be, but because it had such a huge gap of many words that were missing, you know, because when people suddenly started speaking Hebrew, they had no word for plastics, they had no word for the wheel of a car, they had no word for a water faucet, you know, and they needed it. So what happened is that you take this ancient language as a basis, but you start reacting, you know, really, really fast and inventing new words, importing new words, and creating a language that basically what happens is that you all the time switch through registers. Every basically language that you, every sentence that you say in Hebrew will have 2 or 3 words from the Bible, a word or 2 that are either in German or Russian or Arabic, you know, and words that somebody had invented because you really needed something and didn't know how to say it in Hebrew. So this kind of anarchy is something that you cannot translate. You know, many times when I work with my translators and they read a story, they write to me, so what do you say, up or down? Which would mean, should we lift all the register up or should we take all the register down? Should it be colloquial or should it be biblical? Because in Hebrew all the time you do both, you know, it's like I remember I once wrote a sketch for Israeli show, like a little bit like Saturday Night Live, and in this sketch, this guy go to a hummus place and he meets God, you know, and he treats God as if he was a celebrity, you know. He say, oh, you know, what I like the most about you is that you don't give interviews, you know, and he says to him, like, you know, and your idea, photosynthesis, where do you come? Gravity, how do you come with this thing? But at some point, he starts turning on God and saying, yeah, wars, AIDS, you know. And so there is a bit there where he says, like, merciful and kind, my ass, you know. Now, when I say it in English, it sounds strange. When you say it in Hebrew, it sounds natural. You say Rachum v'Chanun Alek. You know, nobody would even. It doesn't even sound strange because this idea of taking words from thousands of years ago and then putting words that, you know, are 5 minutes were invented 5 minutes ago and then sticking something from another language that you saw down the street. This kind of chaos, for me, it reflects on the nature of the country, because, you know, we are a young country, old people. We have all the time this tension between this kind of religious righteousness, you know, we are the chosen people after all, you know, and this kind of a tendency for chaos and contemporary and open-mindedness, you know. So this tension that you see all the time in Israeli politics also exists in the language, and it reflects on our being. And this stuff doesn't translate to other languages, because I think that, let's say, Amos Oz's work translates much better because he writes in high register. But when you write in colloquial speech, the Hebrew colloquial speech has a unique story that has to do with the way that the language developed, and this actually doesn't work the same way in other languages.
We have time for maybe one more question before.
This guy
please.
was the first
He's
one
the
on
first.
that
Then
side.
he gets
We'll
it.
get to
Yeah.
it. But he first, let justice be served. Rafi, can you introduce yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. So first, thank you very much. And I wonder whether you be so kind as to share with us what is your mother's favorite story and why? And maybe you can tell us the story, if it's not too long. And what is your favorite story and why? And you don't have to tell us. It will be an incentive for us to go and buy the book. But just tell us, why do you think this is the best story, or why you like it very, very much?
Well, you know, when I began to write, I come from Ramat Gan, that is very close to Tel Aviv, but the same way that New Jersey is close to New York, you know. So I never knew any artist. I never, like, you know, it's like I never thought when I started writing during my army service, I never thought that I was kind of pursuing a career. You know, I just I would print 3 or 4 copies of my stories, and I give it to my 2 best friends, my brother and my mother. And after a few months, I decided that I'm not going to give my mother stories anymore. Because the thing is that every story that I gave her, she would say, "Oh, that's amazing, you're a genius, so great." And then, like, at some stage, after the 10th story, I say, "Mom, you know, you can't say that all the stories are amazing, great." I said, "But of course I can, they were all written by my son." So I cannot tell you which is my favorite story, because he seemed to madly love all of them. And I guess that's what moms are for. And if I have to say about my story, like, you know, it's not a favorite story, because I think that, you know, that my attitude to stories is not like, I think, a reader's attitude, you know, but I think that the stories that I'm most grateful to is basically the first story I've ever written. I've written it during my compulsory army service when I was 19. And it was called Pipes. And if we have time, I can just tell you about something about this story. Maybe it will be a good way to end. So basically, in the army, I was a very bad soldier in the army. Okay, I come from a lineage of bad soldier. You know, really. My great-grandfather was a bad soldier in the Tsar's army, you know. And I always like to say, you know, I can tell you stories also about my father, but my older brother, he's the only soldier in the history of the IDF, of the Israeli Defense Force, of a soldier that was put on trial and sent to jail for practicing paganism. And it was during the Lebanon War. They left him to guard an aerial antenna, and when his commander returned, he saw that my brother turned the aerial antenna into an Indian totem with a face of an eagle, and in the trial, my brother claimed that he was not worshipping the antenna; he was just tying his shoelaces. He was not bowing to the antenna. But somehow, you know, he didn't have Michelle on his side, and he lost the trial, and he spent 40 days in jail. So I'm a bad soldier. It's a fact, you know. During my army service, I think in the first 6 or 7 months, they kicked me out of 4 different army units. One of my commanders, he was an officer who was a religious man, and he said to me, you know, as somebody who's religious, I believe that every human being, every animal, every planet, they were created for a reason. And he said, you serve under me for 2 months, and I have no idea why God had created you. And he said to me, no, he said to me, no, he said, I'm sure there is a reason, but you need divine wisdom to figure out what the hell you're good for. But the army discovered in some stage, you know, that I'm very good with computers. So they put me in this kind of computer unit, and I did those very long shifts, 24 hours, 48 hours, where basically I didn't do much. I had to wait if the computer broke. I was supposed to try and fix it. And when you're for such long periods by yourself, and you like talking, you start talking to yourself. And at some stage, after you talk enough to yourself, you say, maybe I write something, and I wrote something on a page, and I look at it, and it was pipes, looked like a story, it was 1 page long, I was very excited, but I needed the reader, and I had to wait something like 16 hours for my first potential reader, who was the soldier who relieved me from my duty, and I said to him, listen, I wrote something, I think it's in a story, I'm not sure it's a story, but it's fiction, and the guy said, fuck off. And I said, okay. And I went with my printed 1 page, like outside of my army base, and I said, okay, I need to find somebody to read it. And the usual suspect was, of course, my pagan brother. And so I took a bus to visit him, but we changed shift very early in the morning, so when I buzzed his intercom, it was like 6:30 a.m., and he answered in a half-sleepy voice, and I said to him, hey, bro, I wrote this story, I opened the door, I really need you to read it, and he said, I don't think it's a good idea. And I said to him, what do you mean? He said, it's 6:30, you woke up my girlfriend, she's so pissed, if you come up, we'll just be fighting, how about I come down with my dog, and I read the story while walking the dog. I said, great. He came down with his dog. He had a very little dog. The dog was happy. They usually didn't take him for walks so early. And the dog immediately, they had this kind of, it's in the middle of Tel Aviv, Ben Yehuda Street, but there was this little patch of ground, and he started kind of digging in the ground, like looking for the right angle to relieve his doggy urges. But my brother was more into stories, so he grabbed the page from my hand, and he started walking, reading the story, and as he did that, the dog tried to resist, but it's like big brother, small dog, it's not a fair fight, and after like 5 seconds, I see the dog fell on its side, and my brother go reading the story, dragging the poor dog on the pavement, and I'm a huge animal lover, but at the same time, first guy ever reads my story. It's a big dilemma, but luckily for the dog, my stories are very short, so a couple of blocks later, my brother stops, the dog regains his balance, does what it wanted to do in the first place, and my brother looks at me and he has moist eyes and he says, I don't believe my little brother wrote something so beautiful, and he hugs me and he says to me, I'll never forget this story. If I die 100, I'll never forget what you wrote. And then he said, do you have another copy of it? And I said, sure. So he says, great, and he bent down and he picks the dog shit. Hello? And so he picks the dog shit and throws it in the garbage, and he keeps talking about the story, and I kind of hear him saying, and this idea, and I so liked it, and it moved me, and I kind of see in the corner of my eyes, the crumpled paper in the bin, and those flies kind of going around him in circle, and I said to myself, you know what? This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to write stories because there is something, because it's like, it felt not like kind of like a Las Vegas kind of magic. It felt like true magic, this kind of thing that, that I can see this page disposed there, but the story is still living in his mind and in his heart, and I never stopped writing ever since.
Okay, thank you, Etgar. Thank you, Melissa. And I mean, may I say that? Because I thought of this one story when you talked about Hebrew, about your son, that it's not one of your, I think, best-known books here. I found this very remarkable. We talked over dinner, and The 7 Good Years, which is, I think, really an amazing book, which is out in English, German, many other languages. And he told me today, yeah, but it's not out in Hebrew. And of course, he wrote it in Hebrew, but it's not out in Hebrew because his son, it actually starts with the birth of his son. It's one of the most amazing stories which you have to read if you don't know it. And he said, my son doesn't want everyone to know about me, so I asked him when he was 8, do you want it to be out? And he said, no. In other languages, what did he say?
No, so basically he said that he doesn't want the book to be out, and I said to him, I only wrote nice things about you. So he said, I don't care if it's nice or not nice. I don't see any advantage in the fact that people I don't know will know things about me. And I said to him, okay, but you know, Daddy wrote this book for 7 years and I really want to publish it. Can I publish it in other countries? And he said, will we get any money for it? And I said, yes. So he said, so I guess you can. I don't know anybody in any other countries, so you can.
So if you want to buy the 7 Good Years, it's not out in Hebrew. You can buy it in English, even if you want to buy it in Hebrew. Thank you so much. And
Thank you. Thank you.